All right, Oliveira Lawyers, Luciano Oliveira speaking. Today is Wednesday, July the 17th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are here live with you. I hope to see our friends as usual. We're going to be talking about subjects of interest to those who are present here in our live stream. Let me see if we have any participation so far. I can see we have people joining our live stream as we speak. No participation so far. And just maybe to share about our most recent consultations as we speak. I see here we have a Bill, WS Bill. Oi, Luciano, how is the humidity in Brazil, Rio, Copa, Leblon? I don't think it is a major problem, Bill. Of course, it is like the sea coast. So you do have, a little bit of issues like with corrosion, particularly if you are, by the beach, right? If you are like a half a mile into the city, basically you're not going to have any issues. But if you have, for instance, a beachfront apartment, then yes, you may have some corrosion, like if you have a fridge. You may need to replace, if you have like a flat TV, you may need to replace this flat TV every now and then. And also, if you like to keep your windows open, as you may expect, the weather in Rio de Janeiro is more like warmer than cold most of the year. And even during like winter, you're not going to have a winter like you would have in São Paulo. You have a pretty mild winter, and it's not uncommon for a warmer weather even during winter time in Rio de Janeiro. So it really depends. Like some people, like myself, I'm usually, if I am at the beach, right? Like right now, I am in Fortaleza, right? Like I am by the beach. I am probably like, I don't know, 100 meters, right? A quarter mile. Maybe less than a quarter mile from the sea. And I'm gonna usually keep the doors and windows closed, and I'm gonna have an AC. So in this case, there is not gonna be as much corrosion as it would happen to someone who's gonna keep everything open, right? And just like the wind and the salt coming through, the wind coming inside, right, Bill? So that's my answer to your question. We have Aaron. How do you think the new Thai visa will impact tourism in Brazil? Aaron, can you please share a little bit more about the new Thai visa? I don't know about this the new Thai visa. If you want to share with us, we can better understand if there's going to be some impact on tourism in Brazil. Bill says, thank you. So good to be here with you. So good to have you with us, Bill. I really appreciate the support. We've been getting a lot of consultations related to, I was going to share with you guys a lot of consultations about real estate purchase in Brazil. Currency is being pretty favorable. So yes, for whoever it's out there considering buying real estate, the currency is pretty favorable. There is a large inventory of properties in the Brazilian market. So I would say more than ever, it's a buyer's market. All right. So if you are out there, if you have support from a different law firm, just keep in mind that, as a cash buyer, it's usually easier for you as the buyer to drive the terms of the transaction. However, whenever you are interacting with a seller in Brazil, with the seller's realtor, more often than the seller themselves, realtors are gonna probably, paint a different picture. Like, if you don't act soon, you're gonna lose this property. There is someone showing up during the weekend. I think they are gonna make an offer, and I understand. I mean, it's the realtor's role to push a buyer to take action and to have a contract signed, right? Until the contract is signed, the realtor has, no certainty that they are going to get their commission, because usually there are other realtors out there. So just keep that in mind, all right? If I have a single message to those of you who are considering the purchase of real estate in Brazil, just remember this single thing. It's a buyer's market, and don't let people push your buttons, okay? It does not matter how sophisticated the buyer is. It does not matter if the buyer is from Europe, if the buyer is from the US. We see this happening time after time, like buyers having their buttons pushed. Okay, so keep in mind, buyer's market, you can drive how the deal is gonna happen. Of course, like some sellers, they may be, I don't know, like they may have a different approach. If they don't really need to sell the property, they may say, you know what, it's gonna be under my terms, or you go buy something else. That happens every now and then. But if the seller really needs to sell the property, you should be able to drive the transaction. All right, that's the message of the day. Okay, Aaron is sharing 5 years, very cheap, released 2 days ago, 180 days at a time, 16,000 US dollars required, and not many other requirements. Compared to the Brazilian visas, it's easier to get and lasts longer with fewer restrictions. Aaron, it sounds like a pretty good deal, okay? And I know, Thailand, it's a major destination for foreign citizens. There is a bunch of US citizens in Thailand. I never been to Thailand, okay? I've been to Japan. I'm planning to go to China. This November is going to be my first time in China. Maybe there could be an opportunity to visit Thailand. But Aaron, whenever you compare Brazil to other destinations, whether you are a digital nomad or a retiree or any other type of situation, Brazil usually is not going to stack really well, okay, against any other country. And actually, whenever I am discussing with our clients, I'm going to say, listen, how do you like Portugal, right? Because Portugal, from a visa perspective, usually it's a better deal than Brazil. And I'm always go back to an interview I had with a friend of ours, Jerry Nardini, right? And I always talk about Jerry because Jerry, he was so direct, he was so convinced, and he would tell me, when I asked about Portugal, he said, listen, I have zero interest to go to Portugal. I don't want to travel to Portugal. I don't want to even travel. So what you say about living in Portugal, okay? So usually, why am I saying that, Aaron? Because usually people coming to Brazil, they are not really comparing Brazil to something else, because if they do, Brazil is probably going to lose, okay? Bureaucracy, red tape is huge. The visa framework is not ideal, even though it's 10 times better than it was prior to the Bolsonaro administration, right? Prior to Bolsonaro, there was no real estate investment visa. There was no digital nomad. There was no retirement visa, so there was no visas at all. It was, either tourist or you marry a Brazilian, right? It was like from the Stone Age, okay? Nowadays, at least, we have a more modern visa framework, but still, other countries out there, they are, far ahead of Brazil. And I still see no problem with it. I said something that's not really flattering to Brazil, but now I'm going to say something that is very flattering to Brazil. Brazil doesn't need to work hard to sell itself, okay? Brazil, it has like continental dimensions, and it has an amazing culture that I think it's more than enough to drive people to immigrate to Brazil. Okay, of course, I wish it was more friendly from an immigration perspective, but that's the whole point, right? Brazil sells by itself, right? We don't need to work too hard to bring foreign citizens. That's not my opinion, okay? That's the mindset of the Brazilian government in general, right? The prior administration, like President Bolsonaro administration, they were, actually working harder in a sense of bringing more tourists and immigrants to Brazil. That's why they got the whole new immigration visa framework, right? Like retirement visa, digital nomad visa, real estate investment visa, and a bunch of other visas. The current administration, President Lula, they have a different perspective. It is the tit for tat, or to have Brazil as a more a country that respects itself more, in a sense that, listen, if you're asking Brazilians for a visa, guess what? I'm going to make sure that you need a visa to come into Brazil, all right? And President Lula, from that perspective, he also had, some common sense to have like an e-visa, and basically to just say, all right, you're going to need to get a visa, but I'm going to make it easier because you can do it online. So I'm not really, criticizing President Lula. I'm just saying that the current administration is a little bit less friendly to immigrants than the prior administration, but still, there is no shortage of people coming to Brazil. And when people decide for Brazil, usually they are not going to be comparing Brazil to other countries, because if they do, they're not really into Brazil. And then, yes, they are probably going to find a better deal elsewhere. But Aaron, thank you very much for sharing. Aaron is bringing new information. He's sharing about the Thai visa, which is pretty friendly and interesting for you guys to check. All right, we have a Livion holiday. Would it be easier to purchase a property in Natal, Ponta Negra, or Fortaleza? In terms of bureaucracy, Livion, there is a lot of bureaucracy, okay, in both states, right? Like when Livion is asking about Natal, Ponta Negra, he's talking about the state of Rio Grande do Norte. He's also asking about Fortaleza. Fortaleza is the capital of Ceará. I am in Ceará as we speak. I am in the city of Beberibe, beach of Morro Branco, which roughly translates as the White Sands. All right, I am here in the beach of White Sands. It's a 1-hour drive south of Fortaleza, and both states, they are neighboring states. Okay, so that's probably why Livan is asking about those two cities in particular, right? Natal or Fortaleza. And in those two states, the red tape, bureaucracy, it's there. But it's something manageable to what I am talking about in terms of bureaucracy. In order for you to be able to attend a closing in any of those two states, you're going to need to bring paperwork from abroad confirming your civil status to prove whether you are, single or married. So if you are married, you're gonna need to bring your marriage certificate with an apostille from your country of origin, right? So if you're coming from the United States, for instance, and if you're married, in the state of New York, then you're gonna need an apostille from the state of New York on your marriage certificate. All right. Let's say if you're single, you're gonna need the same thing for your birth certificate, right? And for the purpose of ID or identifying you as a person, as a buyer, the Brazilian authorities or the Brazilian registry in charge of handling the closing for your real estate transaction, they want to know your parents' names. And a U.S. passport is not going to bring your parents' names on it. So that's why the registry in charge of the real estate closing, they are going to ask for such paperwork. Now, passports in general, they are recognized as an internationally valid passport. Not everywhere in Rio de Janeiro state, for instance, they are super attached to, like if you're buying remotely, they're going to ask for an apostille copy of your passport. If you are locally, some registries, they are going to be fine with a authenticated copy done locally. But the point is, both in Ceará and Rio Grande do Norte, usually you're going to need to present either birth certificate or marriage certificate, sometimes both. You're going to need to present marriage certificate and birth certificate for both spouses as well. If the marriage certificate does not bring the parents' names for the buyers, right? In this case, the marriage certificate is not enough. It's required, but not enough. And then on top of the marriage certificate, with the apostille, you're going to need the birth certificates with the apostille as well. All right, so I'm just giving you, Livon, like an example of the paperwork. Usually, in terms of steps to buy the property, you're going to have the contract stage. And then after the contract, like 30 or 60 days, we usually recommend at least 60 days between the contract and the closing. You're going to have a bunch of things that are going to be done during this timeline. And at closing, you're going to need to have all of your ducks in a row. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to close. And the problem there is, if there is a timeline for you to close, a timeline for you to perform as the buyer, and if you don't, usually you're going to trigger a penalty, which in Brazil is usually customary around like 10%. And it could be even more if your contract is saying, on top of the 10% damages that could have been caused to the seller. So, pretty important to review the contract. There is no such a thing as a standard purchase agreement in Brazil. No, not at all, right? I know in some countries, like in the United States, if you're going to rent or if you're going to, buy a house in the state of Texas, there is a real estate association in Texas that that offers a bunch of forms, and those forms, they are truly templates for transactions. You can, of course, customize, but at least you have a start point. There is no such thing in Brazil, all right? In Brazil, contracts, they are negotiated, and they vary substantially when a foreign citizen is buying the property, okay? So that's just like an introduction, Livon, in terms of the bureaucracy to buy real estate in Brazil. But, foreign citizens, they've been buying property in Brazil, for decades. I think there is an uptick in foreign citizens buying property in Brazil because, the Brazilian currency is really weak as we speak. So people with US dollars and euros, they're coming to Brazil and getting some pretty sweet deals. All right, Steve Yu. Is data on previous real estate sales available to the public via the offices that record the transactions? Nope. It is not, Steve. And actually, there is a legislation, that there are laws precluding people from even trying to assemble such databases. All right, like I mean, I had like post graduation studies in notary law, and there are laws precluding private parties. So that if the private party wants to do something like this, and they say, listen, I'm gonna go to this registry and I'm gonna pay a fee to get access to every single deed of sale, and then I'm gonna assemble a database. Guess what? This is against the law. Okay, so yes, weird stuff, right? Like I mean, I know that in the United States you have access to this type of information. If someone sells a house, right? Like I mean, this information is sold in the market, and then there is gonna be all types of businesses buying this data and offering services to the new homeowner, and the new homeowner is going to get a bunch of mail, like from all types of, like a company selling, I don't know, like home insurance, there is home insurance, then there is another type, it's not home insurance, is another type of service that you buy if if your dishwasher breaks, then they're going to replace. Usually it's not a good deal, at least from what I know. But the point is if there is no such data, all right, I know that there is a voluntary effort from the real estate industry to kind of volunteer information about deals closed, and then they can somehow have an idea about price levels, about inventory, but it is not nearly as accurate and as common as you would see in the United States. All right, Aaron. Hi, Luciano. Question for you. With citizenship in Brazil, you have to pay income tax on all income. Same with citizenship in the U.S. to avoid double taxation. And three dots, right? Meaning that Aaron wants to know what is the secret over here. So a good thing with the Brazilian citizenship, Aaron, is that you're going to have the possibility of filing something that's called Declaração de Saída Definitiva, which the concept is like a tax exit declaration. So once you are a Brazilian citizen, if you are in Brazil, yes, like I mean, you are bound to file taxes in Brazil and pay taxes to the Brazilian authority on your global income. And Uncle Sam is never letting you go, right? It does not matter if you are in Mars, if you are in another galaxy, all right, or if you are in another dimension, Uncle Sam still wants your money, okay? And so there is no workaround on the US taxation side, but on the Brazilian side, once you are a citizen, if you actually leave physically Brazil for good, you can file a tax exit, and Brazil is going to say, you know what, now you're going to live, I don't know, in the United States or Europe, you're going to, be making money over there. That's all right. I'm not gonna tax you, right? Again, as long as you file the correct forms, and Brazil is not gonna tax you on your global income, right? Now, if you have an apartment in Brazil, and if you're getting money in Brazil, of course, no matter your tax status, no matter your tax residency, Brazil still wants, you to pay a tax in Brazil, but that's gonna be on your Brazilian income only. But if you are a Brazilian citizen, again, you file the tax exit. If you live in Europe, Brazil is going to leave you alone. You can just pay, if you are in Portugal, you're going to pay taxes to Portugal. If you're living in France, you're going to pay taxes to France. And if you are a US citizen, of course, if you are in France, you're paying taxes to the United States, you're paying taxes to France, but not to Brazil, unless you have income in Brazil. All right, Aaron. So another thing on the double taxation aspect of it, Brazil has a kind of reciprocity approach with the United States. It's not an actual tax treaty, but let's say, let's assume you're living in Brazil as a US citizen. So if you live in Brazil, if you're spending more than 183 days in Brazil, or more than 183 days in Brazil, or if you are a permanent resident, you're going to pay taxes in Brazil. But let's assume your income comes from the United States. And if you have very from a very broad perspective. I'm not going to get into the details. There are some, additional rules to this thing. But let's say if in the United States you're making 100,000 US dollars, you're paying a 10% tax bracket. In Brazil, most probably than not, you would be bumped to the 27.5%, which is the highest tax bracket as we speak, because for you to get to the 27.5% tax bracket in Brazil, any money that you're making is going to bump you to that point, right? Because income in Brazil is usually much lower than what you get in the United States. So once you have income in the United States, usually this is going to bump you to the 27.5. Now, in a very simplified manner, if you're paying 10% in the United States, Brazil is not going to charge you 27.5, like all over again. Brazil is going to look at you and going to say, all right, so you paid 10% to Uncle Sam, and now I would charge you 27.5, but let's not double tax you, right? So let's consider the 10% that you paid to Uncle Sam as a credit, and instead of charging you the 27.5 that I would charge someone with that income in Brazil, I'm going to charge you 17.5, meaning that they are giving you a credit for the 10% that you paid to Uncle Sam, right? So you see, there is a somewhat, common sense approach. Let's not double tax you for, like the entire 27.5. Let's apply a credit for whatever you paid in the country in which the income is being obtained, right? Does it make sense? Okay, so that's like an intro to the subject of taxes, Aaron, and I hope it was helpful. Ella Belladonna, oi galera, welcome Ella, good to see you over here again. Ella is talking in Portuguese. I know that my friend Bill is learning Portuguese as we speak. So hopefully Bill is going to be able to answer to Ella's Portuguese messages here in our live stream. Aaron has a follow-up point. Would it make sense to just go to the permanent route and not apply for citizenship? This way you aren't double taxed. So Aaron, that's an interesting question. However, permanent residency, it triggers tax residency in Brazil, all right? You don't need to be a citizen, okay? So if you are a permanent resident in Brazil, it makes no difference from being a Brazilian citizen, right? If you are, like a foreign citizen with permanent residency in Brazil, or if you are a Brazilian citizen, you're gonna pay taxes the same way, okay? Actually, it's better to be a Brazilian citizen because then you have access to the switch, right? You leave Brazil, you file the tax exit as a Brazilian, you have access to the tax switch, okay? Now, if you are a permanent resident, it's a little bit more complicated because if you file the tax exit, it's the same thing of saying to the Brazilian immigration, well, I don't want to pay taxes, I'm leaving Brazil for good. And guess what? This is almost the same thing as giving up on your permanent residency, okay? So from that perspective, in my understanding, the citizens, the Brazilian citizens, they are going to have an advantage of having a clear access to the tax switch. All right, Aaron. L. Davis, welcome, L. Davis, to the live stream. What are the criteria for buying a property in Brazil? Do I get a citizenship after the purchase? How much is the minimum for purchase? So L. Davis is asking about, residency in Brazil through the purchase of real estate. This is known as the golden visa in many countries, right? So you have the golden visa in Portugal, you have the golden visa in Spain, and in so many other countries, right? Now, the golden visa is going through some changes. In Portugal, you can no longer achieve the golden visa through real estate acquisition. There are still some routes. For instance, if you invest in funds, if you buy treasury bills, I'm not sure if it is Spain or Portugal. Now I'm mixing up a little bit. But in Brazil, interesting enough, like real estate is the only route, right? Actually, there is a real estate route. There is another route, which is investment in a company, which we don't think it's a good idea for foreign citizens, so we don't handle here at the firm. But the golden visa in Brazil through real estate is actually the only route, okay, when you are investing in something other than a company. And L. Davis, in Brazil, currently, you need to buy a property of at least 1 million reais in most of the country. If in the Northeast and in the North, then it's going to be 30% less, and therefore you just need to buy something for 700,000 reais. All right. Now, this amount has been the same since the inception of this visa back in 2018 by President Bolsonaro. So we're talking about 6 years with the same amount. And this amount was set, for some reason, it was set in Brazilian reais. So there was no adjustment. There was a huge inflation since 2018. So we know that President Lula administration is like after ways to increase the revenues for the government to invest in education, in development, and so on. So it sounds like a pretty low-hanging fruit for the Brazilian government to increase this amount, okay? But we haven't heard anything so far. So as of now, it remains those amounts I just told you, L. Davis. And you don't get a citizenship, right? You're going to get a permanent residency in Brazil. And the current understanding is after 4 years in Brazil, in which you must be 3 years in Brazil out of 4 years, meaning if you want to travel, like 100 times, you can travel 100 times as long as you are physically in Brazil for 3 years out of 4 years. In this case, yes, you can apply for the Brazilian citizenship, right? But no country, as far as I know, I mean, the countries I know, like United States, Brazil, Spain, and Portugal, these are the countries I have, knowledge of, the immigration framework. There is no such a thing as you invest and you get citizenship, right? Like you invest and you get permanent residency. And after you get the permanent residency, if you qualify, then you can apply for citizenship down the road. So Brazil, 4 years, Portugal, 5 years, okay? And Spain, 2 years, all right? So out of those 3, like for those who are in a hurry, if that's your case, L. Davis, like Spain is going to be, the way to go. All right, Steve Yu, I've been monitoring apartment prices in Rio and noticed that there are large differences in prices for apartments with similar features in the same building, trying to understand the difference. All right, Steve, so there is a world of possibilities for why you are seeing such differences. I'm going to touch a couple of them, right? The first one, which is unfortunate, and it is usually a surprise to foreign citizens, it is the bait and switch listings, okay? So in the United States, when you have a property in the market, this property is going to go through something called MLS, right? The multiple listing service is a standard in the United States. It's a consistent database, and this database, it's vetted. So not surprisingly, whenever you have something being advertised in the market, this is a somewhat consistent leasing or opportunity, meaning like it's difficult for you to find a fake when trying to buy properties in the United States. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like an MLS in Brazil. I personally have spoken or discussed with more than one of the real estate associations in Brazil, like saying, listen, why don't we get something like the MLS, right? But there are some, like things we're not gonna address over here that preclude Brazil from developing an MLS system, and it makes it very easy for like bad players, to advertise fake properties. It makes very easy for fake properties to be advertised in the Brazilian market. So if you've seen something that is like, I don't know, like half of the price, most probably than not, that's like a fake listing. All right. So hopefully this is going to explain some of the distortion that you see in the advertisement, and other things. It could be like properties that shouldn't be sold at this moment. For instance, if a property is entangled in a probate, super common in Brazil. Probates in Brazil, right? Like when someone has a property, this person dies, and you have a bunch of heirs. Heirs start to fight among each other, right? Super common. And a probate could last like for 10 years, for 20 years. And sometimes, like people are very creative in Brazil. So maybe the heirs are going to try to sell a property that they should not be trying to sell in the first place. And guess what? To find someone willing to buy a property that should not be sold, and they're not going to get a deed, they're going to be getting basically a piece of paper, like a contract, right? They're going to be selling for much less than the market price, because again, they need to find someone willing to buy something that is, I don't know, just think like about cars, right? Like when you have in the United States, if a car crashes, the title is going to be marked savage, right? Like, I mean, maybe my pronunciation is not on point, but the point is like if the car was wrecked, there's going to be a mark on the title. And whenever this car goes to the market, it goes to eBay or I don't know, like any marketplace, or if people are buying at auto trade, and you ask for like the Carfax report, right? The Carfax report is going to say this car is tainted, right? This car was through a crash, maybe it's running now, but one thing for sure, this car is not the same thing as a car that hasn't crashed. So in my story, this apartment, it would be this apartment that has a pretty bad mark on either the title or some other type of situation. And that may be a reason for why the property is being sold for much less than other properties that you see in the same building. All right. So I hope that helps, Steve. Okay, Aaron Lopez. Okay, I heard that Brazil charges tax on global income when you are a citizen. Wasn't sure. Yes, it does charge taxes on your global income unless you turn the switch off. Okay. Steve, you planning to retire in the next 2 years and move to Brazil? Will not be fighting for retirement benefits until age 68. What would be the best visa to get? All right. Yes. Well, you listen. For Brazil, you don't need to have a minimum age, but I think you got the point because you're talking about retirement benefits, right? So you need to be you need to receive like at least $2,000 in retirement income. Super common here at the firm, right? And it doesn't need to be retirement like Social Security. It needs to be retirement type income. Okay, so something super common here at the firm. We have U.S. military personnel applying at very young ages. Okay, like the youngest applicant we approved here at the firm, he is in his studies. And now I am proud to have a young gentleman in his 20s who is applying for the retirement visa in Brazil because he has income from the U.S. military, right? And I'm sure that that was not his desire, because, as you may expect, the reason why he's no longer working and he's getting like the retirement type of income is because he did suffer, right? Like he did suffer a pretty debilitating injury, so it wasn't his desire, but now he's in this situation. And the point is, like he's in his 20s and he does qualify for the retirement visa in Brazil. Now let's go back to your question. What would be the best visa to get? Right, so you're moving in the next 2 years, you'll not be filing for retirement benefits until age 68. I'm not sure about your age at this current time, but the digital nomad visa is a great entry-level visa that's going to give you access for up to 2 years in Brazil. Okay, another strategy, Steve, maybe to keep your brain sharp, is for you to study in Brazil. And I have a friend of mine, Max. I spoke about him here at the live for a few times. Max, like he got 2 bachelors in Brazil just for the sake of staying in Brazil, right? So his strategy, right? Like, I mean, he wanted to stay in Brazil. He said, what do I do? All right, I'm going to study, right? So first he studied, he got a degree in accounting. And his second degree, he was in law, okay? So first a degree in accounting, second a degree in law. And he was not actually recently, right? I think it was in 2019. Can I believe 2019 sounds like yesterday, okay? Maybe it was 2020, I don't know. I mean, this sounds too far into the past, but we did help Max to get his permanent residency through the purchase of real estate, right? His parents, they passed away, and he was able to buy a really nice property. And I'm sharing that, right? It's just a first name, like nobody's gonna know who Max is. Like we don't share information, enough to identify a person. But as he's a friend of mine, it's more like general information. But what I'm saying is, like, there are no really easy ways. It's not like Portugal. Portugal gives you a bunch of routes, right? Like Portugal, you're gonna have like the passive income visa. In Portugal, you're gonna have an investment visa. In Portugal, you're gonna have the student visa. In Portugal, there was, for instance, the Sephardic Jewish visa. Right, there is a bunch of other visas. There is even a visa to seek employment, right? Like I never heard about that elsewhere, right? But it means like you don't have a job. Like I want to get a job in Portugal. Guess what? You're gonna apply for the job seeker visa, which, by the way, we are currently assisting an applicant here at the firm with the job seeker visa for Portugal, meaning you don't have a job, you want to live in Europe. Guess what? You get a visa, you go find a job in Portugal, right? And then you have roughly like 6 months to find a job. If you don't find a job, then guess what? You gotta go elsewhere, right? But particularly if you are an English speaker individual, pretty easy to find employment in Portugal. So there you go, right? Like Portugal, pretty easy. Brazil, not easy at all. So if you don't qualify for the retirement visa, digital nomad is on the table for a couple of years. If you wanna, stack, like education, then you can study in Brazil for as long as you are willing to study. It could be 10 years. Maybe you don't even need a retirement visa. If you wanna keep your mind sharp, go to a university, study forever in Brazil, and there you go. You don't need anything else. Or, of course, there is the golden visa, the so-called golden visa. If you buy a property in Brazil, then you get the permanent residency. All right, Steve? Lena Madu. Welcome, Lena. I think it's your first time here. Welcome to the live stream. Good to have, fresh faces here. Hi, I have a question about being a self-employed freelancer. How can I prove that I am a remote worker? I can prove my income, but how do I confirm my remote status as a freelancer? Lena, you could have a letter of verification issued by a client. All right, so that's something you can have. Like, I mean, you don't need like formal employment. You just need a letter of verification from a client, and this letter is going to need to have a few things, such as a date. Is going to need to be signed by your client. It needs to show how much money you're making. It needs to have a detailed description of your work. Okay, it needs to be on a letterhead showing that this client, this company, is from abroad and not from Brazil. It needs to say that this thing is valid for at least a year. And it needs to say that you are able to perform such work remotely. All right? So there you go. These are the minimum requirements for this letter of verification that your client is going to provide. If you work with us, right? If you work with us to get your digital nomad visa, we even provide you with like a template that you can present to your client for them to use the template as a start point, right? It's not for them to complete, it's for them to use as a start point. That's for our clients, okay? So sometimes we have like consultation and then people think we make money out of our consultation. We do charge the consultation, by the way, but we don't make money, okay? I mean, we charge money, but it's like a reduced hourly rate. So when you have our consultation, it's not like we're making money. We're super happy that we're giving you all the steps that you need to secure a visa. We're just doing that in order to bring new clients to the firm. But when we are doing the consultation, we go over your case in details, like addressing every single concern you have about your journey. And for those who end up hiring our service for the actual work, then we do provide everything that we have here in-house, like such as our, like our templates, like we have a management board. We use Monday.com to manage the visas. We actually file the application, right? We review every single document that you're providing. But again, this template is for people who are hiring our service, right? Not for consultation. Sometimes people pay for the consultation. They think, all right, now I'm going to get everything I can possibly think of, including the template. So that's not how it works, right? The consultation is for us to discuss your case, to review. We do screen sharing. We show you things, like we review. If you have documents you want to have a review during the consultation, we do that. And then for many people who have a consultation with us, they are going to decide to actually hire our service to handle the visa. And that's usually the whole purpose of the consultation, is for the client to get to know our work, for us to review the case, to share a lot of actionable advisory during the consultation. And, hopefully the client ends up hiring our services for the actual job, for the actual work to be done. All right, Lena, I hope that was helpful. DD, Double D, welcome, Double D. Good to see you over here again. Lived in Brazil for 1 year at age 15 with Brazilian passport. I have apostille documents of Brazilian mother's marriage certificate, my birth certificate from 1980. Brazilian consulate confiscated my passports a year ago. How do I proceed with reinstatement of citizenship? Confiscating a Brazilian passport, it doesn't mean you're not a citizen, right? Like there are a couple of situations, Didi, and there is a bunch of potential outcomes for what you said, and I cannot tell just by that. But there are two main possibilities, right? Like the first possibility, you were actually found as not qualifying for the Brazilian citizenship, which is pretty rare, right? That's not my main guess over here. The second guess is just like your passport was no longer valid, and they simply took your passport away. But if the Brazilian government takes your passport away, it doesn't mean you are no longer a Brazilian. Okay, so if I had to guess, I would guess you are still a Brazilian. If I had to guess, okay, of course, like there is a need to review, like your documents, like if your mother recorded your birth certificate at the consulate when you were a child, which seems to be the case because you said at age 15 you had a passport. So my guess is that you are as much Brazilian as you were back then. Okay, and in order for you to let's say to continue your journey as a Brazilian, you're gonna need to catch up with lots of things. All right, some of them being you need a Brazilian tax ID known as a CPF, right? That's one thing. Second thing, if you are a male, you're gonna need to enroll for the mandatory military service, right? That's the second requirement, okay? Third requirement, you need a voting ID card from Brazil. And on top of that, you need to make sure that you pay the fines because you haven't been voting, okay? So on top of that, there are a few other things. So people come to us under this type of situation, and then what we do, we sell a block of hours. We say, listen, let's sell 10 hours of busy work for you, all right? Our office is gonna do busy work, and then we set up a board. We have all the requirements that you need to meet, and then we work on each item until you clear every item up. And then once you've done that, then you qualify to apply for a new Brazilian passport, all right? Okay, Ella, GV route to citizenship in Spain is 10 years. For people who come from countries that weren't colonized by Spain, Brazil counts for some reason. EB5 in America gets you a green card in 10 years. All right, so yes, I mean, the information I have for GV route to citizenship in Spain is 10 years for people who come from countries that weren't colonized by Spain. Brazil counts for some reason. All right. So there you go. Information I have is like 2 years in some cases for Spain. And Ella is saying 10 years for people who come from countries that weren't colonized. Yes. I know there are different circumstances, but I know there are some routes for citizenship in 2 years. So maybe to review, the idea here is to review each case individually, right? To see how many years it would take you to achieve the citizenship in Spain. Ronnie Dio. All right, Ronnie, good to see you. Good to hear from you. I had a realtor tell me I need an RNM, not just a CPF, to buy a home as a foreigner. Ronnie, you certainly don't need an RNM, okay? Most of our clients, I would say maybe 70% of our clients, they don't have an RNM when they buy real estate, right? And actually, many of them, they are buying the home in order to get the RNM, okay? So that doesn't make much sense. However, there is a somewhat exception to the rule, which is like rural real estate. For some rural real estate, the registry is not going to handle a closing unless you have the RNM card. And this is going to be different from state to state and registry to registry. So, for instance, São Paulo, right? Like in São Paulo, we know we had some transactions in which the person was able to buy rural real estate without an RNM. And in deeper parts of the countryside of the São Paulo state, smaller towns, they would say, listen, if you don't have an RNM, we're not going to allow you to buy rural real estate. Now, for urban real estate, we never had a single circumstance in which a person was precluded from buying real estate because of an enema, okay? And a passport is going to be used like in probably most of our, I don't know, maybe 90% of our transactions, right? Or, the 70 or 80 I told you, it really depends on the type of transaction. But the passport, like in Rio de Janeiro, right? We have a transaction every single month, at least one, sometimes 2 or even 3 a month in Rio de Janeiro alone. And most of the time, almost every single time is going to be someone who's going to be buying the property without an enema, right? So they're going to be buying with a passport. The passport is going to be their ID. Of course, they need a CPF, but the RNM is not usual. It's extremely rare for a registry to ask for an RNM. And in our experience, this is going to be related to rural properties, Ronnie. All right? L. Davis, do I have to live in Brazil to keep my permanent residency or citizenship status? What would make a person lose the citizenship or permanent residency status? L. Davis, so for citizenship, once you become a citizen, you don't have requirements to remain in Brazil or to stay in Brazil, and it's kind of similar to the United States, right? If I get a citizenship in the United States, I can, move elsewhere as long as I'm paying ANCOSAN. They're pretty happy with me, right? So no need to come back to the United States. Brazil is the same thing. You get the citizenship, you can go anywhere you want, and you're not going to lose the citizenship. However, the residency, there is an ongoing understanding that you must be in the country for at least 2 weeks every 2 years. Okay, that's actually valid for the first 4 years, and the understanding is that you should also keep doing the same for after you get a permanent residency. However, it's super common for people, once they get the permanent residency, they go elsewhere and they don't stay in Brazil for a couple of weeks every 2 years, and they still keep the permanent residency, right? So there is the recommendation, and then there is how the immigration is going to review those permanent residencies. And our recommendation is 2 weeks every 2 years in Brazil, you're good. All right. Another thing related to lose the residency, very important for people buying real estate in Brazil. There was a piece of legislation, or a regulation, better saying, is not a legislation because it was not by the legislators, it was by the federal government. It was a few years ago, I don't recall if it was 2021, 2023, maybe 2022, I don't recall. They passed regulations saying that if you're getting immigration benefits through real estate, you must keep the real estate to qualify for the immigration benefit. And if you ever sell the property, it means you could lose your permanent resident status, right? And that could be, 20 years down the road, in theory, right? Now, there is a gap between the regulation and how the immigration actually handles those things, okay? But I'm telling you, if you're getting permanent residency through real estate, you better not sell the property. Otherwise, you are risking losing the permanent residency. All right, L. Davis. Steve, you need to schedule a consultation. I'm planning a trip to Rio for some time in September or October. Do you complete face-to-face consultation? Steve, we don't schedule face-to-face consultations, right? We need to be mobile, okay? Like the attorneys at Oliveira Lawyers, we usually travel for both business and whenever, right? Like we have an opportunity to have a break from routine, we're gonna be traveling. So right now, for instance, I am in Fortaleza. If I say, well, I'm gonna schedule with Steve a consultation for September the 25th. Guess what? Now I'm stuck at the office because of a consultation. Okay, like that would be that wouldn't be desirable, like for our business model. So our consultations we handle through Zoom. One thing I love about Zoom, which I cannot do live at the office, is like share resources. When I am at Zoom, at a consultation, I can share 10 things. Like if we're talking about the R&M card, I can show you 6 different cards and tell you the difference between those R&M cards. I can show you, like if you say, how do I find a property? I can pull up like the 4 main search engines for properties. I can share, about different aspects of your journey in Brazil through screen sharing, right? If we are face to face, it's awkward. Like I'm going to be opening a computer, it doesn't work quite well. So we really like to stick to the consultations via Zoom. And because I understand there is always a concern that, well, I want to make sure I'm dealing with a real world, law firm. So we do have offices in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, offices with staff and the very good old-fashioned Brazilian coffee. And I always extend this invitation to our, community. If you want to show up for a cup of coffee at our office, you don't even need to let us know that you're coming. You just come and you have the cup of coffee. We're gonna take, a few pictures for our social media. We're not gonna give you a free advisory though. That's the warning. Don't come for free advisory. You're not gonna get it. All right. Advisory, it must be a consultation scheduled for a Zoom consultation. But if you wanna show up at the office without notice, you're more than welcome to come and to have a cup of coffee with our staff. That's free coffee and some, traditional Brazilian warmth. And we're going to take a few pictures with you for our social media, but you are more than welcome to show up at our offices, Rio de Janeiro, Avenida Rio Branco, 123. Now we are at the 17th floor. We are getting some renovations done in our office at 1712. So we are at Suite 1702, the same floor as our permanent office. And in São Paulo, we are close to Praça da Sé, and we are across University of São Paulo Law School. That's the law school I went to, and our office is literally across the street, right? Not as a coincidence, but because we have naturally we have a relationship with the area, with other attorneys, with law professors, and for those of you who don't know, like University of São Paulo, that's where most of the justices of the Brazilian Supreme Court they came from, and there is a very close knit community of people from law in the area. So we love the area. Downtown, like in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, as well for the matter, is not a super fancy area. Okay, like if some law firms they like like a more fancy location, they are not gonna be in downtown. Okay, we are downtown guys. We like downtown. We like the style. We like the vibe. We are downtown attorneys. All right, but again, here is my invite for you. To come and have a cup of coffee with us. I hope you like the invitation. All right, WS Bill, what a great stream today. Please like. I appreciate Bill. Bill is always on the lookout for us. And if you guys could please like our live stream, that will be appreciated. And I see we've been live for over an hour. I'm going to take a couple of additional questions. And let's see what else we have here. All right. We have L. Davis in regards to childbirth in Brazil for a foreigner. What services do you render? Would you also take up to 3 years to acquire citizenship? I read it's 1 year for parents after they have their child. Yes, L. Davis, that's correct. So for childbirth, we do usually the application. Okay, like for people when they retain our services, we have the board. We open this communication channel. You have full access to our team, and people are gonna make good use of this communication channel. So some clients are going to say, listen, I'm hiring you, for the visa. I understand that this is the scope of the work, but would you mind sharing about good hospitals for us to have our childbirth. And we have no problem in telling you, about the good hospitals. Not surprisingly, our knowledge is more focused in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, right? Like if you're going to ask about Fortaleza, because I have a personal connection with the state of Ceará and Fortaleza, I also have a very good knowledge. I'm going to be very happy to provide suggestions. But if you're asking about Minas Gerais, if you're asking about Goiás, we have no clue about the good hospitals over there. However, on the immigration side of things, we can pretty much assist you no matter where you are in Brazil, because the filing is on a national basis, right? Like the immigration system, it works like as a federal immigration, like in Brazil, just like in the United States, right? The United States is pretty like states, they have their own laws, but when it comes to immigration, it's federal. And in Brazil, almost everything is more federal than on a state basis. But yes, for immigration, it's the same thing. So we can file, like immigration applications and assist you with everything you need immigration-wise, no matter where you are. But with the hospital recommendations and a few things that are usually related to childbirth, L. Davis, usually more like in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Now, about the citizenship, what I tell our clients for childbirth permanent residency is the following. Yes, after you have your child, you're going to apply first for the permanent residency, right? There is no application. Some people say, well, once my child is born, when do I get my passport? It's not how it works. First, you need to apply for the permanent residency, and after you have the permanent residency, yes, after you have the permanent residency, yes, then 1 year later, as long as you stay the whole year in Brazil, you can apply for the citizenship. Now, the dynamics of the application usually is gonna be it's gonna take a while, because there are language proficiency exams, and I'm not sure if that's still the case for 2025, but I think 2024 there were two scheduled exams. These exams, they are available across the country and even outside the country. But the thing is, it's not as simple as, well, I stay here 1 year in Brazil, next day I'm getting my passport, right? There are many hurdles, all right, many requirements, many documents, many applications. But you are correct. From a legal perspective, you have a child. After you applied for the permanent residency and you got to the permanent residency, a single year of residency in Brazil will allow you to apply for the Brazilian citizenship. That's what we call fast track. Another heads up, because sometimes it's difficult for people to learn Portuguese, right? Unless you know Portuguese already, I would say, it's a little bit unrealistic to pass the exam in just a single year of Brazil. So, most of the time, even though, yes, you have the fast track of 1 year, to stay in Brazil for 3 years or 4 years is going to be a better route for people who have a Brazilian child or a child born in Brazil to apply for the citizenship, all right? It's going to be more feasible, like to stay in Brazil for 3 years or 4 years. But yes, the 1 year route, the fast track route is there for sure. Okay, Didi, for study visa, since education is free in Brazil, would it be free to non-citizens as well while establishing permanent residency? Didi, so it depends on who's the applicant, right? Free education is like for, the first grades, right? Like it's not like for instance, for college education. So if you are a child, potentially, yes, you could have a study visa studying for free. Okay, but if you're not a child, if you are an adult, there is no free education for you, okay? There is free education, for instance, the university I went to, Universidade de São Paulo, University of São Paulo, is still nowadays, it's free. but it's pretty tough for you to get a spot, right? So unless you are a nerd like I am, it's pretty tough to get a free college degree in Brazil because, like usually it's the opposite of the United States. In the United States, the most competitive university and college, they're gonna, cost a lot of money, right? And the free ones, or those who are pretty affordable, they're gonna be the state universities. In Brazil, it's exactly the opposite. If you're gonna study in a private organization, a private university, it's gonna be pretty affordable because like they have a lot of universities, a lot of programs, and to make it feasible for Brazilians to study, they're gonna charge you little money. Now, for you to enter like a university like Universidade de São Paulo, or like usually the federal, the federal government, they have a bunch of universities throughout the country. They are going to be pretty tough for you to get into those programs, and they are going to be the most recognized, like the foremost universities in Brazil, right? So let's say in theory, like I'm not sure if you were following when I was sharing about my friend Max, like 2 degrees in order to stay in Brazil. Now, Max, he did study like in private institutions, so he did pay for everything. Now, if Max would actually enter a program from University of São Paulo or a federal university for that matter, yes, he would have a free education, and he would be able to have, the study visa for as long as he was studying at the university. All right, Didi. Steve Yu, thanks for the invite. I will work on scheduling a Zoom meeting. I'm going to be honored, Steve, to meet you. When you schedule the consultation, do me a favor. Say, listen, I participated in Luciano's live streams, and I would like to have the consultation with Luciano. So I have the pleasure to meet you over Zoom. And yes, the invite is for you. Show up at any time at our offices for a friendly cup of coffee. All right, we have the traditional Brazilian espresso. So make sure to drop by, Steve. Moses, please, how can I contact you for legal service? First thing, good to see you, Moses. I was missing over here. I said, where is Moses? Moses is not here. Moses, the entry door is always our email. Okay, email. I'm going to write over here, info@oliveiralawyers.com. That's how you can contact for a quoting, for, or, to work some type of service agreement with the firm. And to schedule a consultation, then it's even easier. For schedule the consultation, we have a live link. You just need to click on this link I'm going to be sharing over here. You can schedule the consultation, and just like I told Steve, you just ask for my participation in particular. Then I'm going to take your consultation. I'm going to be honored to meet you as well, Moses. I hope that helps. I want to thank you, everybody who's here. I know we are in July, which is like a vacation time for many people. And so if you are taking the time to meet with me today, I want to say thank you. And I want to be able to see you. We're not going to be meeting this coming Sunday. We're not going to be meeting next Wednesday, but we're going to be meeting on the Sunday after, which is going to be July the 28th. All right, and we have this live stream scheduled on YouTube. So if you could do me a favor, go over there, click on notify. If you do that, when we get to the 28th, even if you forget, YouTube is going to let you know that the live stream is about to start, and you're going to be able to join us. So thank you, everyone, and you have a blessed rest of your Wednesday. You take care.